Je préfère voyager à l'étranger.
Faculty, students, and honored guests, I thank each of you and I thank the school and the officials here for the visit the University of Texas at Austin. My wife, Virginia, and I are pleased to be here to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. If my memory serves me, this is only my second visit to the University of Texas, and this is the first visit at the invitation of the university. But I hired and worked with a number of outstanding young people associated with this university. My first was now Chief Judge Greg Maggs of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Armed Services, who was a fairly new faculty member at the law school when I became a member of the court. He took a leave of absence to help me as a law clerk during the second half of my first term. My first UT graduate to serve as a law clerk was Greg Coleman 3 decades ago. Greg went on to become the first solicitor of the state of Texas. He was simply outstanding, as was his son Reed, who also was a graduate of the law school here and who was also equally outstanding. Greg's widow and our very dear friend Stephanie is with us today. Stephanie, thank you, and thanks for being such a good friend. And both Greg and his son Reed clerked for my dear friend Judge Edith Jones, also a graduate of UT Law School. I greatly admire Judge Jones. She is one of my heroes, and I admire her as a person and as a jurist. And I'm grateful that she can be here today. A number of my former clerks are also here. I can't tell you which ones, so let me ask them to stand to be recognized. So in my chambers, UT and UT Law School are very well represented. I hope, I'm having a little trouble with this, getting used to the podium, sorry about that. I hope that my talk today will help in some small way to inaugurate another great initiative, the state of Texas's plan to restore the teaching of civics and Western civilization to a central place in its flagship university. And I am grateful and honored to have been invited by Justin Dyer, the Dean of the new School of Civic Leadership. I'm also grateful for the assistance of my former law clerk, Professor John Yu, who has spent the last 3 decades at Berkeley Law School, but is now joining Justin and his team here at the University of Texas. The school's stated mission is to help students encounter the distinct inheritance of Western civilization and the American constitutional tradition as part of a larger quest for freedom for wisdom about how to live and how to lead. Your plans could not come at a more important moment for our nation, when, as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, the very values announced in it have fallen out of favor. It is my sincere hope that your work to revitalize the teaching and research of Western civilization and the American constitutional tradition will lead the way in the reform of our nation's colleges and universities. And I hope that your example will help to rejuvenate our fellow citizens' commitment to the principles of the Declaration of Independence. I seem to always enjoy my travels to this amazing state. My wife, Virginia, and I have many wonderful friends and acquaintances here. And it is so special to have our dear friends, Harlan and Kathy Crow, join us today. One of the features of this state that stands out in a way that is the way that Texans talk about it. What comes through is a sustained and sustaining affection that they have for their home state. That reverential feeling for and attachment to Texas is to be respected and admired, and if possible, emulated. This affection is similar to the attachment that I grew to have for my home state of Georgia, and certainly for our country, despite the indelible mark of segregation and its companion evils. I was proud to say that I was American by birth and Georgian by the grace of God. It was not uncommon to hear others openly proclaim their allegiance to God and country. At our grammar school, St. Benedict's, we started each school day by lining up 2 by 2 and class by class in the schoolyard to watch the raising of our flag and to say the Pledge of Allegiance before silently marching to our respective classrooms. Even as so much of our God-given and constitutional rights were denied us, we still faithfully said the Pledge of Allegiance, memorized the preamble to the Constitution, and yearned for the fulfillment of its promised ideals. Sadly, these sentiments are not as widely shared among our fellow citizens today, and they certainly do not seem to have that sustaining strength that they had back then. In fact, all too often, the sentiments tend toward rejection.
Is allowed to expire without a new deal. The 2-week ceasefire, which began on the 8th of April, is due to expire imminently.
Earlier on in the program, I spoke to our correspondent in Islamabad.
Security personnel are on active duty in the capital with numerous checkpoints in place. The city's red zone and the roads leading to the red zone where these talks are going to take place have completely been sealed off. We have seen that the stage is being set for the past 3 days, and the 2 hotels intended to house the delegation, the Serena Hotel and the Islamabad Marriott, were evacuated on Sunday, and they still remain under heavy military guard. We are just a few meters from the area, and we can hear the sirens of security convoys passing by. In 48 hours, we have seen that a number of U.S. cargo aircrafts have landed at the Noor Khan Air Base, the same air base where the 2 delegations are expected to land, and the U.S. aircrafts are said to be carrying security equipment and armored vehicles for the U.S. delegations. For now, we still do not have the confirmation if the talks will go ahead as planned for Wednesday morning, as we know that there hasn't been any confirmation from the Iranian side on whether they will travel to Islamabad for the talks or not. Just today morning, we saw that Iran's ambassador in Pakistan posted a message on X saying that Iran will not negotiate under threat. At the same time, there is a lot of confidence in Islamabad that the talks will go through. We are talking to sources within the Pakistani government who told us that behind the scenes, diplomacy is in full swing. And like last time, they're trying to exert pressure on the other before the talks begin. So everything is ready here. The city has barricaded itself. And even though the situation remains, of course, very uncertain.
Top diplomat says the bloc will gauge the willingness of member states to take individual measures against Israel as they meet for a meeting in Luxembourg. And as Spain is bringing up again its demands for the EU to suspend the cooperation deal between the two. A little earlier, I spoke to our correspondent Dave Keating in Brussels.
We have two things going on concurrently here, right? So we have this ninth session of the Two-State Solution Alliance, which for years has been trying to find ways to advance the two-state solution, which of course has been made more difficult over the past 3 years because of the October 7th attacks and Israel's incursion into Gaza. And as they discuss these possibilities, we have the Palestinian premier of the Palestinian Authority here really stressing the point that Israel's actions in the West Bank, and specifically the actions of Israeli settlers in the West Bank, are obviously working counter to the solution of a two-state solution. And so attention has turned into the possibilities of the EU's trying to stop those settlement activity from happening, and also specifically sanctioning violent Israeli settlers. Now, there was an attempt to have a vote on this in February, but it was vetoed by Viktor Orban's government. Speaking to reporters at the summit, Kaja Kallas, the EU's foreign policy chief, said now with the election in Hungary that will put a new government in place, there is probably the possibility to pass that, but they don't know yet. Now, the tricky thing is, yes, we have this meeting of foreign affairs ministers today where they'll discuss this, but there is a transition period in Hungary. So the government of the opposition leader, Peter Magyar, is not yet in place, and there will be Viktor Orban's representatives there. Now, the controversial foreign minister, Peter Szijjártó, is not there, I'm told, but there are Hungarian officials there, so they need to see whether they're going to continue that veto today. Nevertheless, there are several EU countries that want the EU to go much further than just sanctioning violent Israeli settlers. That is all that Germany has been willing to do, but there's also this question of the EU-Israel Association Agreement. It underpins trade between Israel and the EU. The EU is Israel's biggest trade partner. So we've had the governments of France and Sweden co-sign this letter saying that all products from the West Bank should be excluded from that association agreement since they are not covered. But a further 3 countries, Spain, Ireland, and Slovenia, want to go further and are calling for the complete suspension of that agreement. You heard there the Spanish foreign minister reiterating that this morning. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said it again in a speech on Sunday. The big question is whether there's a majority for this, because that is considered a trade issue. So for that, they only need a qualified majority of countries supporting. It's not considered a foreign policy issue, which requires unanimity. And so all eyes right now are actually on France and Italy. There today, because if those governments change their position on this, they could have a majority. France has been kind of in the middle on this. Italy has been a big supporter of Israel under the government of Giorgia Meloni, but now her ties to Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu are fraying, and so we'll be watching those 2 foreign ministers closely today to see if the positions might have changed, and so maybe they could get a majority for suspending the association agreement.
core of the world's premier consumer tech company, Tim Cook is stepping down as Apple's CEO. In a statement, Cook expressing his appreciation for the experience.
I feel a gratitude that I cannot put into words, that I somehow got to be the leader of a company that ignites imaginations and enriches lives in such profound ways it defies description. What an honor and a privilege it has been.
Cook took over from visionary co-founder Steve Jobs in 2011, just before Jobs' death from cancer. Building on the momentum of hit innovations like the iMac, iPod, and iPhone developed under Jobs' leadership, Cook grew the company into one of the most profitable in the world. From a market value of just over $350 billion at the start of his tenure, by 2018, Apple would become the first trillion-dollar company, now valued at more than $4 trillion. Its annual profit more than quadrupling to $110 billion last year. During that time, Cook has had to navigate an increasingly complex geopolitical situation, especially since the arrival of Donald Trump in the White House and his ensuing trade war with one of Apple's key suppliers, China. While his leadership has been deft, under it, Apple has not launched any major groundbreaking new products. Its Apple Vision Pro headset largely a bust. Meanwhile, it's mostly sat on the sidelines of the AI race. Many are looking to Cook's successor to push the company into new territory. As a hardware engineer with 25 years at the firm, John Sternest has the background to do so, and big shoes to fill. European
paying the price for the change anyway. James Racine.
As this family sets off for the Canary Islands, each cabin bag has set them back €40.
Tickets are already quite expensive, and this makes for more fees. Or you end up worrying about whether your bag is the right size.
Airline companies currently set their own luggage policies, leaving passengers at times confused about the size and the amount of luggage that they can take with them.
We paid for checked luggage, but we didn't know whether we were allowed to take cabin bags and whether they'd fit.
These paid-for options are most of the time offered by low-cost companies, allowing them to keep their ticket prices down. But in this example, a journey from Paris to Rome ends being more expensive when booked with the low-budget Transavia than with Air France. Once a cabin bag has been added, costs that many would rather avoid.
We could have spent the money on other things.
A few trips to the restaurant?
Well, personally, I was thinking about going shopping.
MPs of the European Parliament are seeking to change that and have put forward a proposal that would oblige all airlines to include a free cabin bag weighing up to 7 kilograms in the price of their tickets. That this might not actually benefit passengers.
If
Low-cost companies can no longer have cabin bags as a paid option, they'll have to do like other companies and increase the price of their tickets. So, overall, consumers will end up losing out.
Negotiations are currently underway with members of the European Council, and an agreement could be reached by summer.
Comes after yesterday, you'll remember, the Prime Minister Keir Starmer denied misleading Parliament over the appointment of Peter Mandelson as UK envoy to Washington, accusing officials like Robbins of deliberately hiding information that the Labour politician had been denied security clearance. Robbins has told that hearing that he did not approve Mandelson because of pressure, but because officials thought that they could mitigate any risks raised in the vetting. He also said Mandelson did not actually fail the vetting over Jeffrey Epstein, his links to Jeffrey Epstein, but over another issue that he didn't know what the issue actually was. Now to a very special person. UK, through decades of social and structural change, will have found, say, remaining a symbol of national stability. A series of events. A Life in Style looks at her fashions throughout her reign. It's at Buckingham Palace at the moment. King Charles.
Her near century was one of remarkable change, and yet, through each passing decade, through every transformation, she remained constant, steadfast, and wholly devoted to the people she served.
King Charles paid tribute to his mother.
The U.S. and Israeli-made crisis in the Middle East, average Americans are going to have to keep coughing up the cash at the pump.
It's going to be a disaster. Yeah. We have to be big in our pocket. So as a driver, we're going to lose money.
I think the gas price is going to be going up, but we just need a miracle. We just need a miracle.
They have delivery trucks, so we deliver out to most of the consumers around the area. It's not easy at all. It's mostly double what we usually use per day.
With anger rising across America and the president's approval rating sliding, that could be a moment where Republicans are tested in the upcoming midterm elections. And that could spell some bad news for the party. Caleb Moffat, RT.
And a member of the Farmer Citizen Movement in the Netherlands, and also a member of ENVI, the Environment Committee here. Welcome to you.
The IDF is working to assist the community in restoring the statue to its place.
The footage in question was taken in southern Lebanon and sparked a global outcry, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu quickly condemning it after the images went viral. Some Israeli lawmakers say this reveals a disturbing trend in the country's military. RT heard exclusive.
For nothing forever chemicals, because they don't disappear, and really to make them disappear, if we succeed to do so, this is very expensive, very high in energy also costs, and not really efficient also. So we find them even in our blood in the meantime. So that's why, and they are very hazardous for human health, but for also environmental health. On human health, for example, they can cause cancer, but they can also harm our reproduction. So it's really important that we act on this and that we consider really phasing out of these PFAS, of these eternal chemicals.
Cooking with frying pans and stuff like that?
Absolutely. I really do take care, and I really inspect the pans whether they're not leaking these substances. Some still have these layers, especially older pans, although the newer pans, to be honest, already have been have gotten rid of these forever chemicals. So, but these layers are, I think, in many people's kitchens and eaten from daily. So it's really, in this sense, it's concerning that citizens in the European Union are not aware of the risks associated with it.
Yes.
Flying overheads in the area in a breach of the ceasefire. Behind me is what's left of the civil defense, the volunteering center of the civil defense of the Islamic Health Committee. This was targeted during the war. 2 paramedics killed and 2 wounded in that airstrike. Those are the people who stayed here to help rescue wounded, to help rescue people from under the rubble, and all their teammates were killed also during duty, and they were deliberately targeted, all the paramedics in Jibshit and elsewhere. There's hundreds of paramedics killed during this war. The amount of destruction in Jibshit this time is greater than the 66 days, as the mayor told us. We spoke to him and he told us more about the situation in the city.
During this war, Daa was repeatedly subjected to air raids, most of which were obviously aimed at vital facilities inside the village, including the city center, the mosque, and the civil defense department. It is absolutely obvious that this enemy is acting in brutal and inhumane ways, attacking civilian and medical institutions. A strike was carried out on a civil defense vehicle, which led to the death of one of the employees. Our repair team is currently fixing the damaged infrastructure and power supply lines. That's why we urge people to return and remain resilient. The entire infrastructure is protected for them.
Lefas is one of the elderly here in the village of who stayed here during the 45 days of the war, never left his house, and he survived the whole war, the bombardment, the strikes that happened in the city, and even close to his house. And he's telling us more about his experience and why did he stay here.
I was here in the village during the war. We were afraid the whole time, running from shelter to shelter under all the attacks. I stayed here, but where else should I go? This is my country, my pride and my homeland. We have shed a lot of blood here. Jibshit is watered with our blood. This is our land. We will not give it up.
For which no safe alternatives exist. Yes, I agree. Industry should innovate, should develop these alternatives. But if we look at medical applications, for instance, inhalators, but also certain forms of antidepressant pharmaceuticals, we really need to be careful that we don't create shortages for these essential.
You're leading to there shouldn't be a specific date on the derogations. It should be based on when the alternative is actually found.
No, I do agree with Ms. Metz that if we don't put an end date on it, then maybe the innovation will not happen, because we do have to have a certain pressure or incentive for industry to develop these safe alternatives. But I think we need to be pragmatic for these essential applications. But we should also not do as if nothing has happened ever since. And since this call, we have a ban on PFAS in fire extinguishers, textiles. So we do have
along with 700 square kilometers of territory. Again, we speak about March and April alone. Now, those who follow this conflict closely, they know how vast, how stretched this front line is. And of course, the intensity of the fighting varies drastically section to section. So one of the key directions here to look out for and to watch more closely than others is the agglomerations of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. These are the two major towns, cities even, in the Donetsk region of Russia, and they are known, for instance, Slavyansk is known as the cradle of the people's resistance back in 2014 when Ukraine began its so-called anti-terrorist operation trying to quench the rebellion here in the east following the coup in Kiev. Now the Russian armed forces are creeping closer to those two towns. According to the reports, they are 12 kilometers away from Slavyansk and just 7 from the town of Kramatorsk. What it means is that it puts those two strongholds well in the range of Russian FPV drones and artillery already. And when it comes to kamikaze drones, those are not just those flying on optic fibers, but also flying on radio signals. So it drastically expands Russia's ability to try and
logistical lines of the Ukrainian armed troops. Now, this advancement has been made possible after the Russian troops liberated another major stronghold on that direction, the town of Seversk. So this is becoming a pressing matter for the Ukrainian armed forces, especially given that so far, if you look at the peace negotiations, Russia's key demand has been that Ukraine pulls out of the Donetsk region, which Russia considers its own. It is weighing those numbers, and it is very likely that will skyrocket even further, and it could aggravate the already existing crisis of manpower, which has been playing on forces for quite a while now. So again, this is something like a situation report as to how the situation on the front line is looking out so far, and something to watch out for.
World War II. Well, close space to an EU member state is not the only limitation imposed on Slovakia. The EU Commission is moving to completely cut off the bloc's imports of Russian energy by 2027 and is working toward abolishing member states' veto powers. In response, the Slovakian government moved to file an action to the European Court of Justice defending Slovakia's right to self-determination in the energy sector. According to lawyer Delamir Sosansky, more EU states must wake up to stop Brussels' detrimental policies.
EU chief diplomat Kaja Kallas recently said that the EU should learn a new word, starting with the letter Q, which she meant to mean the qualified majority. In this way, she wanted to make it clear that the right to veto in the European Union would no longer exist, and this is the essence of the dispute. In line with the other argument of Slovakia, namely that the member state self-determines its energy policy and the choice of energy sources, it was agreed in the constitutional agreements of the EU, and even earlier, it was confirmed, for example, by the Constitutional Court of Poland. I am afraid that a change in the current position of Brussels in the short term is unrealistic, but more and more realistic voices are being heard, claiming that the import of energy carriers from Russia should be restored. I would like to note, for example, the opinion of the Minister of Energy of Qatar, who announced in 2022 that it is impossible to replace Russia in the modern energy world. And the current situation in the Middle East proves that he is completely correct, unlike Brussels. Not only in our country, but also in other countries, unfortunately, a new term, a new word has appeared: energy poverty. These are people who simply cannot afford to pay for energy. The state is creating various support programs for these people, including in Slovakia. But I think the best program would be to just provide cheap energy. I hope that Hungary will not change its legal position in this dispute, and I believe that not only Hungary and Slovakia, but other countries can and should join this dispute claim. I am afraid that the economy of the EU will have to go through a stronger blow so that the leaders learn and change their ideological views to a more pragmatic approach. In this way, can they ensure the competitiveness of the European Union, which now suffers from expensive and inaccessible energy.
Is on its way yet, still mixed.
Official.
Uncertainty hangs over prospective peace talks between Iran and the US. US planes touched down in Iran on Monday, but the delegation, including lead negotiator Vice President J.D. Vance, alongside Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, is said to arrive this Tuesday, according to reports in US media. Meanwhile, wrangling over the Strait of Hormuz is continuing. Donald Trump has said he won't lift the US blockade of the waterway until a deal has been reached with Iran. According to CENTCOM, the US Navy has turned back at least 27 ships since a tit-for-tat measure was introduced on the 13th of April, including an Iranian-flagged vessel which was seized on Sunday. Iran had been vehemently critical of US tactics in the lead-up to this new round of talks.
Trump, by imposing a siege and violating the ceasefire, seeks to turn this negotiating table in his own imagination into a table of surrender or to justify renewed warmongering. We do not accept negotiations under the shadow of threats, and in the past 2 weeks we have prepared to reveal new cards on the battlefield.
Iranian officials have refused to publicly confirm attendance at the peace talks. But the Wall Street Journal reports that Iran has told regional mediators that a team will be sent. With back-channel talks mediated by Pakistan gaining momentum, reports of tightened security in Islamabad may indicate that preparations are underway to receive the delegations. Further bombardments of Iran if the truce is allowed to expire without a new deal. The 2-week ceasefire, which began on the 8th of April, is due to expire imminently.
Personnel are on active duty in the capital with numerous checkpoints in place. The city's red zone and the roads leading to the red zone where these talks are going to take place have completely been sealed off. We have seen that the stage is being set for the past 3 days, and the 2 hotels intended to house the delegation, the Serena Hotel and the Islamabad Marriott, were evacuated on Sunday, and they still remain under heavy military guard. We are just a few meters from the area, and we can hear the sirens of security convoys passing by. In the past 48 hours, we have seen that a number of U.S. cargo aircrafts have landed at the Noor Khan Air Base, the same air base where the 2 delegations are expected to land, and the U.S. aircraft are said to be carrying security equipment and armored vehicles for the U.S. delegations. For now, we still do not have the confirmation if the talks will go ahead as planned for Wednesday morning, as we know that there hasn't been any confirmation from the Iranian side on whether they will travel to Islamabad for the talks or not. Just today morning, we saw that Iran's ambassador in Pakistan posted a message on X saying that Iran will not negotiate under threat. At the same time, there is a lot of confidence in Islamabad that the talks will go through. We are talking to sources within the Pakistani government who told us that behind the scenes diplomacy is in full swing, and like last time, both sides are trying to exert